Hello over there. We have been discussing building on the right foundation. We've been discussing some of the issues that go against, that counter, that are not helpful for marriage. Some of the reasons why some marriages are not successful. And I was thinking about that point, a successful marriage. What is a successful marriage? How would you describe a successful marriage? How would you say that your marriage is a success? Yeah? What do you mean as a young couple in courtship, preparing to get married, and you want to have a successful marriage? What would that mean? What are the parameters to describe a successful marriage? And even thinking about my own marriage. Been married for 8 years now, by the grace of God. My wife, Amy, we have 2 sons at the moment. Yes, we have 2 sons. The Lord has blessed us with 2 wonderful baby boys. Lukshama, who is now 3 years old, and David Bentheo, who is now 7 months old. But of course, the same question applies to me. What do I mean when I say my marriage is successful? What are the criteria? What is the criteria that I would use to describe my marriage and to categorize it as a successful marriage? And in thinking about this question, I thought, as for me, my marriage is successful, or would be categorized successful, to the extent that it lives up to the objectives that we have set out for our marriage. The extent to which our marriage strives to live up to the objectives, the goals, and the purpose for which we got married. The purpose, the reason, the objectives for which we got married. And for us as a Christian couple, and as I have clamored time and again, our marriage is founded on the Word of God. The extent to which our marriage is in conformity to the Word of God, to the extent to which our marriage is in conformity, is in pursuit of God's purpose for our marriage, to bring Him glory and honor. To that extent, my marriage is successful. To that extent, my marriage is successful. Of course, as I've said, it is God who gave us this wonderful gift called marriage. It is God who brought us together. It's God who desired that we get married in the first place. Yes, it's God who created us man and woman, male and female, and then gave us that desire to get married. But what does that mean in practical terms to have a successful marriage? I guess you could use a lot of criteria, right? You could say, the extent to which we are communicating effectively in our marriage, the extent to which we trust one another in our marriage. But those are, you could say, the fruits of a successful marriage, right? I would say those are the fruits of a successful marriage, that when you look at my marriage, when you look at your marriage and you find that there is trust in there is effective communication, that there is effective conflict resolution, that in that marriage there is love and friendship. There is love and friendship and all those fringe benefits that come along with having a godly marriage. You know, I thought of one thing again, that probably I could describe a successful marriage as a marriage whose love never fails, whose love has never failed, whose love is unfailing love. That perhaps if I could describe in one sentence what a successful marriage is, then I would describe it in terms of 1 Corinthians chapter 13. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, which we call the chapter of love, right? And the Apostle Paul was saying that if I do not have love, then I am nothing. He said, I could speak in tongues of angels, I could prophesy, I could give up all that I have for the poor, I could, lose my all in the name of sacrificing for the less fortunate. And then he said, but if I have not love, if I do not have love, then I am nothing. So he says, if thou hast not love, if you do not have love within you, in you, coming out of you, if you have not love, if I have not love, then he says, all that I would ever do would be summed up with one word: nothing. We're described as nothing. And we know from the same scriptures in the Holy Bible that love covers a multitude of sins. Then Jesus said, they will know you by how much you love one another. They will know that you are my disciples by the way you love one another. And I thought I could apply the same criteria of 1 Corinthians chapter 13 to the scriptures. Because if you look at 1 Corinthians chapter 13, he says, love is patient, love is kind, love is what? Does not rejoice in evil, but rejoices with the truth or in the truth. He says, love is patient, love is kind. And then he says, hopes all things. And then he says, love never fails. Then he says, love never fails. And I thought, how wonderful. What a perfect fitting for a description on a successful marriage. That a successful marriage, if I am to take 1 Corinthians chapter 13 to describe what a successful marriage is, then I would say that a successful marriage is a marriage whose love never fails. It's a marriage whose love never fails, or whose love is never failing. Because you see, marriage is a process. And we know that it goes on enduringly strong, faithfully strong until the finishing line, until death does us apart. And so, I could literally then say that the extent to which you continue in love, to that extent, your marriage is successful. The extent to which you and your wife, you and your husband are walking in love towards one another, then you could say that that marriage is a successful marriage. Yes. And and therefore, to strive to love one another. He says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. But how much more than your spouse? How much more than your husband? How much more than your wife? Right? He says, husbands, love your wives, even as Christ loves the church. Right? To the extent to which you love your wife, and you know love is sacrificial, is selfless. You give up yourself for your husband. You give up yourself for your wife. Totally and absolutely. So he says, so then I would say, and I think I will be right, I will be in the right to say that the extent to which you love one another as husband and wife, to that extent, your marriage is successful. All right? Just wanted to share that quick thought, and I'd like to hear from you. What do you think is the criteria for categorizing your marriage as a successful marriage? And of course, I don't want to go without saying the following, that love is unconditional. Married love is supposed to be unconditional love. So you can see how high the bar is. You can see how high that bar is when you say the extent to which you love one another is the extent to which your marriage is successful. So it's not a simple sentence. It's not a simple statement. It's not a cop-out statement that, this guy is so lazy, you know. But when you go deeper, you know, to try and understand this, what it means to love your husband, to love your wife, then you realize it's not a joke. It is not a joke. And therefore, it is not a joke to say that the extent to which you love your wife, the extent to which you love your husband, it is that, to that extent, that your marriage is successful, or your future marriage will be successful. All right, guys, see you.